Supercharged current affairs debate and electrifying opinion.
Carol Malone, in for Julia Hartley-Brewer on Talk Radio.
Okay, we've been talking about rape, about victim blaming, and about the part alcohol plays in all of that. On the line, we've got Natalie Collins, who's from the Spark Anti-Domestic Abuse Organisation. Natalie, welcome.
Good morning.
Hi. You've been listening to the conversation? We've been talking about it's been in the news this week. Megan Clark came out and said that Judge Lindsay Kushner was right when she warned women about the dangers of drink when they were out and warned them to keep safe. In this week also, a judge called Philip Sorrick, he said that a lot of rape charges are thrown out of court because both parties were drunk and neither of them could remember, and if there's no independent evidence, that the guy has to be acquitted. What do you think about that?
Well, I think the reality is that the stats for convictions for rape are at 5.7% in the UK, which is absolutely appalling.
It's appalling,
and actually, yeah, and I think it relates to a much broader issue that the law wasn't really set up for cases where there aren't any witnesses. So we have a big problem with how the law works. That actually, if it does come down from one person's word versus another, that's a real challenge in terms of being able to evidence what this is. But I think there is there's lots and lots of things that can be done to improve the amount of convictions, including training for judges and training for jurors to really understand what's going on in terms of situations of sexual violence.
But these judges are talking sense, aren't they? When they're saying to young women, you have to be careful. You know, this Judge Kushner, she wasn't being judgmental about Megan Clark in that court case, not in any way. She actually said, and in fact, Megan said that at no point was she victim blaming. All she said was, yes, women are entitled to drink themselves into the ground if they want to, but we don't live in a world where there aren't consequences to that, and so women have to be careful.
Well, I just think that the whole focus of this being on women, what women should be doing, men are penetrating women without their consent. Surely that should be our concern.
It is our concern, but shouldn't women be trying to avoid that?
But like the fact is, women can't avoid it. 90% of women are sexually assaulted by somebody they know, by their partner, by a friend, by somebody in their university. So if we don't get drunk, that's not going to stop us being sexually assaulted. We're going to just be sexually assaulted in a different context.
Well, it's not going to stop every sexual assault, but when a top judge says that a lot of the cases that he comes across have to be thrown out because drink was taken by both parties, we have to listen to him, don't we?
Well, I think we have to look at whether that should cause a case to be taken out. In order for the man to be penetrating the woman against her will, he has to have some level of consciousness about what he's doing, and the woman isn't necessarily conscious. And so I think we have to look at a greater responsibility on men to say, don't have sex with people that you don't have consent from, and that has to be our primary focus. The case of the judge this week who turned to a group of students in school saying, don't take pictures of girls, don't take pictures of yourselves in particular poses, whichever ones who's decided reach that standard of being inappropriate.
That's good advice, isn't it?
There was no turning to the boys and saying, please don't penetrate somebody against their will. Please choose not to manipulate and control and abuse girls. And so there's this disparity between what we're saying, which is women don't do this, don't do that, and actually the people who are causing this is not women. Do not cause themselves to be raped by being drunk. Men could choose to rape them when they're drunk. So we have to put a lot more responsibility on this being about what men should be doing. And
but we do, we do, don't we? I mean, of course we do.
I haven't heard any judges saying men stop raping. is that?
I think they don't actually have to say that. It's pretty implicit. I think,
but why don't they have to say that?
I think
they should be telling children that.
What you touched on at the start of this was, you talked about the conviction rate, and I think this is what lets rape victims down more than anything. One of the figures I read this week was that 80% of all reported rapes, 80% never get to court, and of the 20% that do, only half of those end in a conviction, which means that 10% of all rapes in this country, and how many, you'll know better than me how many there were, 30,000 last year, so only 10% of those end in a conviction. And this is what's letting women down, isn't it? And even when a rapist is convicted, I think the average term is 4 to 8 years, which means you're out. If it's 4, you're out in 2. If it's 8, you're out in 4. That doesn't seem to me like a tough enough sentence.
Yeah, and so in terms of the stats, it's not 10% of all rapes, it's 10% of reported rapes. So obviously for all the rapes
yes,
that are
of course,
reported,
the ones,
there's
yes,
plenty that others, most are not reported. And so, yeah, I think there is absolutely a need to improve conviction rates. But what all the evidence and what all the experts say, and this isn't about some kind of ranty women having a problem. This is about actually the evidence shows that you're not going to reduce rape by stopping women drinking alcohol. You're going to reduce rape by stopping men from choosing to rape.
You're not going to reduce all rape by asking women not to get hopelessly drunk, but you might stop some of them. Megan Clark, who was brave enough to waive her anonymity this week, she said that she wished she hadn't drank the way she did. This girl, she was lying unconscious in a nightclub when a bouncer found her and threw her onto a street, which is a little bit careless in my eyes anyway. He shouldn't have done that, but she
gets... a lot careless, isn't it?
She gets thrown out onto the street at 5 o'clock. She doesn't know where she is, okay, and then she wanders into McDonald's and meets these two guys. Now, that to me is just... There's part of me thinks she could have avoided that, and she says that herself. Megan says that herself, and we have to listen to whom this has happened.
Honestly, I think we do have to listen to what people are saying, but there's been a case this week where a woman has written to a judge and said that even though her partner beat her over the head, please don't send her to prison because I want to marry him. Actually, the reality is that when somebody has been subjected to an assault, when somebody's been subjected to violence of some kind, there is a whole issue of blaming ourselves and going, well, if I'd done this, that wouldn't have happened, because that allows us to feel we have more control than we really do in a situation. So I'm not saying we shouldn't listen to people, but we have to be aware that there's lots of psychological processes that we go through to try and make sense of what we've been through. And I think, no matter what the situation, anybody who's been subjected to a sexual assault will have at some point rationalised and justified it and said, well, if I hadn't have, this wouldn't have happened. So I don't think that we can point to this and say, well, because she's saying that, then that must be, that's the case for most people who've been subjected to sexual violence. And I think one of the things we have to say here is that, all of this assumes that men will rape. It assumes that fundamentally the issue we have in society is that men rape, and therefore we have to make sure women monitor their behaviour to manage this. And actually what we probably need to do is, I would suggest, maybe stop men drinking and say, actually, men, you shouldn't be allowed in nightclubs because you might rape. It's constantly feminists who are said to be man-hating, but to assume we live in a world where someone's going to rape us suggests that we have a very low view of men.
No, but you say there's an assumption that men will rape. It's not an assumption, it's a reality. They do, and they have been doing it for centuries. And yes, it's wrong and it's horrible, and if I had my way, I'd throw them all down a dark hole and forget about them. But that's, we're not actually going to stop that. But what we can do is stop quite as many women getting raped. I just think, we have to, do you remember when Chrissy Hind talked about being raped? Do you remember those stories I think it was in the Times last year? She said she'd been raped, and she said, I take some responsibility for that. She said the guy who did it, she said he used to walk around in I Love Rape t-shirts. He was part of a bike gang. He asked me to go somewhere with him on a date. I went and he raped me. And she said, I have to take some responsibility for that. She was monstered by campaigning groups, by feminist groups. She didn't fit their narrative because she was actually saying, I take some responsibility for this. But they weren't listening.
I just don't. I think we have to be really careful. I wouldn't want to monster anybody who's been subjected to sexual violence, and however they process that. But there is a greater responsibility, absolutely, if that's her personal narrative. Similarly, with the woman recently who said she's forgiven the man who'd raped her and they were on a platform together. Yeah. It's fine for people to have a personal narrative and for them to process their trauma in whatever way is most helpful for them. But to write that in a national newspaper or to stand on a platform and do that means that you perpetuate views across society. And I think we really need to, I know that your kind of goal is that we maybe have less women being raped, but I'd really like to get to a point where rape no longer is an issue. Well, and I think so would I,
but that would be in a perfect world, Natalie. We don't live in a perfect world. We live in a dark, dangerous world.
But I think it actually, we can start with very young children. We can start by educating boys not to see girls' bodies as acceptable. We can start to challenge the way that pornography is used.
That's happening. That is all being done. And it's happening in schools. Kids are getting sexual education in schools. But listen, we say to our children, don't get into cars with strangers. Don't listen when the guy says, come and see the puppies. We insure our homes against damage. We do all of that. And yet we're not looking after our own bodies in perhaps the way you should. We're not insuring against getting harmed.
But because I don't think it works, because it doesn't work. It's not just that I don't think it works. The evidence shows that no matter what women do, there is still a risk of being raped. And actually, maybe what we need to do is implement a curfew for men and say, actually, after 7 o'clock at night, men aren't allowed out. Because actually,
Natalie, that's never going to happen. That's not a world. That's not the world we live in. It's never going to happen.
But why can't we have conversations about what we should be asking men to do?
So you would have a curfew
about what women do.
You would have a curfew on guys, all guys after a certain time, instead of saying to women, just don't drink as much as so that you're hopeless and you don't know what you're doing.
Because the responsibility and the actions always have to be taken by women. It always has women have to do something to prevent rape. If men can all stop rape by staying in after 7 o'clock at night, why wouldn't they want to do that? Surely they want to stop women doing rape.
Rapists are execrable people. Like I said, I'd shove them all down a hole and feed them fish scraps for the rest of their lives. But the bottom line is, I care about the women they're hurting, and it's no good saying to a woman who's been brutally raped, it wasn't your fault, it was absolutely his fault. It's going to take her years to get over what happened to her, if she ever does. Isn't it better that we try and stop it happening to her in the first place?
Of course it's going to take her years to get over. And actually, one of the processes of getting over sexual violence, as I can attest personally, and actually as women, who have been through this journey and women who produce resources around this, is enabling women to get over the fact that they blame themselves. And so if we are saying that in order to support people to get free of the trauma of abuse, we need people to be able to stop blaming themselves. But then we're saying, but actually, let's as a society tell women they're partly to blame. Those two things that don't work correspond very well, do they?
I don't think we're telling women to blame, and I don't. I think. Megan Clark was saying that she knew she wasn't to blame for what happened. What she's saying is, maybe I could have avoided what happened to me.
And I think, what do we do? Should we just constantly, as women, what do we spend our whole lives avoiding rape? Because that's the reality. So first of all, is that we shouldn't drink too much. Then it's we shouldn't wear certain clothes. And then it's we shouldn't go to certain places. Then we shouldn't have relationships with certain people. That it starts with one thing and it's always yet another thing that women could do to stop themselves being raped. So, and actually the highest rates of sexual violence are in parts of the world where women aren't allowed to drink, where women aren't allowed to go out on their own. Because actually this isn't sexual violence isn't fundamentally about whether women are drunk or not. It's about whether men think they have the right to use women's bodies how they want.
Natalie Collins, you make a lot of very good points. Thank you for taking the time to come on the show today. Appreciate it.
Bye.
Have a good weekend. Bye-bye. Okay, we're going to take a break.